And welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 176. Today, Andy has sent us an image to take a look at and give a bit of feedback, and Marilyn has been asking a little bit about focusing and also the notion of back button focusing. So we're going to talk a little bit about that too. But here we are live on YouTube. Leave a comment. Let me know you're here. Let me know where you're from. Tell me what the weather's doing. Certainly a bit grim outside here. And yeah, let's make a start. So yes, I can see we've got a couple of people in already, and yeah, so let's take a little look. Susan says hello. What a really wet, miserable Sunday. Susan's just down the road from us, so absolutely can agree with you there. The weather's very much the same. Maggie says it's so dark too. April says hello everybody from a cloudy and mild day. Supposed to have major rains and strong winds later on. Oh, well, I hope it doesn't hit you too bad there. And then Susie and Maggie are chatting to each other. Robert says, howdy all from Texas, where it's sunny and cold. Janet has joined us, saying hi from a chilly but not really very cold Mississauga. Andy says, hey everyone, greeting from a rainy Hertfordshire. Pat says, season's greetings to all. Meg says, hello everyone. And Rosemary says, good morning, floody and something hidden behind a little symbol that I can't quite see. In the Pacific Northwest. Yes, so for some strange reason the chat stream means that there's a little place where I can stick a heart on something and it just covers the last kind of bottom corner word on anybody's writing. So all I can see from Rosemary is good morning, floody and d. Looks like it begins with a D. Could be dry? We'll find out. So, yes, where are we? Yeah, so here we are, live on YouTube, unless you happen to be watching the recording, in which case you can still leave a comment if you want, but just nobody will see it live and I'll need to answer it later. Make sure you subscribe, click like, all that kind of stuff, somewhere down there if you haven't subscribed already. Also, make sure you click the notification bell so you know when future ones are coming up as well. It's moved up. Floody and dark in the Pacific Northwest. Okay, right. Of course, it's sort of only about something like 7 o'clock in the morning. So yes, sun probably hasn't risen there yet. Right, okay, so where are we? What are we talking about? So today then, we've got a couple of things to talk about. So yes, Andy sent in a rather intriguing image and is looking for a little bit of feedback on that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with Marilyn. So Marilyn sent in a comment, and okay, let me suddenly realise I just need to slide this over slightly so I can see. What I would also say, yes, so there was a season's greetings there from Pat earlier. Also, happy Hanukkah to anybody who happens to celebrate that as well. My understanding is, what are we on, day 3, day 4, something, I think. So I hope that all goes well. Right, yes, so where are we? Marilyn. So Marilyn says, sometimes I struggle with autofocus, and occasionally the camera changes focus when I click the shutter. I've heard that back button focusing could help. Do you use that? Is that something we could talk about on Sunday? So what's this notion about back button focusing? What are we talking about? Now, if you happen to just be using your phone or a point and shoot where everything is set on auto, this isn't something you overly need to worry about. So the next bits we're going to talk about are really if you happen to own a DSLR, maybe a bridge camera, depending on the kind you've got, or a mirrorless of some kind, where you have control over various things. So if we pick up the camera, this is my Canon R5. Now, generally speaking, what tends to happen with most cameras is somewhere on the front here, where you click the shutter. You go click, you press it down, and it fires. But if you half depress it, if you start to press it down, what it does is, if you've got it set on autofocus rather than manual focus, that's the point, as your finger goes down on the button, that it starts to focus on the subject. Now, there's a number of different options for setting up focusing, and each of these has a kind of, well, part of it's down to your personal preference, but also depending on what you're actually going to shoot. Now, the thing about the half depress bit is you can half press it down, and as long as you don't go all the way, it will focus, and then when you've got it focused where you want, you push your finger the rest of the way and it goes click. And then that way, hopefully, you focused on the thing you actually want to be focusing on. So ideally, if you're focusing a person, you focus on the person and not the wall behind them, which is a very common problem for a lot of us when we start out with our camera. And especially some of the early cameras or more basic cameras, the bit that focuses is right in the middle. So what happens is if the person is slightly off to one side, but the focal point is in the middle of the screen, it will end up focusing over their shoulder on whatever's behind them, so the person themselves doesn't tend to be in shot. So the way you would traditionally do that is you would point the camera at the subject, half press, hold it so that it's focused where you want it to, then rearrange the camera to create the composition you want to have, and then press it the rest of the way. And that way your subject remained in focus. However, you do have a slight problem that sometimes what happens is as you start to press it and it focuses, between the point whereby it's in focus and you go click, you might sway backwards and forwards slightly, or your subject might sway backwards and forwards slightly. Now, if you've got a relatively narrow aperture, so a deep depth of focus, then somebody moving forward, back and forth a centimetre or two, it's not going to make a lot of difference. But if you happen to be shooting with a wide aperture and a shallow depth of field, then what happens is that little centimetre can make all the difference between a person's eye being in focus and their eye being out of focus, but maybe their ear or the back of their head or the front of their nose is in focus, but the eye is slightly out of focus. So just that very slight little, almost imperceptible hand movement or rocking movement of the person or the subject, and it goes out of focus. So that's a kind of tricky one. Also, sometimes just trying to hold it steady, the act of clicking, as you click, as you press, you can see that the camera itself might actually just jiggle up and down. So if you don't have it on a tripod, if you're not doing remote release, there is always a slight problem. The actual act of operating the camera can create a shudder, can create a blur, can create a movement, but all these things can mean that something that should have been in focus wasn't. So how do we work our way around that? Now, there's a couple of different things as well. There are 2 or 3 different focusing modes. So if you go into this, you will find that there's things like you will find single shot, AI focus, and AI servo, and I'll talk about those in a minute. The other thing you will find is quite often you have most modern cameras now have a selection option for where you want to focus. So you might find in the back of the screen, don't know how well this is going to show up, but if I turn this on here, and so you can see something there. Now, if I half press, now I need to press one of these or press one of those. No, you're not really going to see. It's trying to lock on. But what happens is I have a little option whereby I can work with a real kind of pinpoint and say, right, I want it to autofocus on this very specific point here, or I can say I want it to lock on to something a little bit more general, a little bit bigger, or it can take the whole screen and I let the camera kind of decide what it's going to lock on to. Now, that can be quite good if you either can't see particularly well or you don't have the confidence to know where you're supposed to be focusing. The camera auto settings are really quite sophisticated these days, and it will lock on to something. The problem is sometimes it will lock on to the bit that you didn't want it to. So having the manual override or being able to sort of zero in and decide which point you want makes a lot of difference. And then what also happens is on this camera, just at this point here, I've got almost like a little joystick, and I can move it up and down and left and right. And what that will do is it will allow me to choose the point I want in focus. So I might decide that I want the top right corner in focus. That's the key point. Maybe I've composed the whole thing. There's a person standing there. I want them in focus. The background slightly out of focus. So I select that point. In my earlier cameras, I had a number of points on the screen I could choose between, but they were fixed. With this one, I can move the joystick and select any point on the screen. But it all depends on the sophistication of your camera. So you have these options then for how you focus. Then there are these modes, And the two key ones are sort of single shot and AI servo. Now basically your single shot means that you line it up, once you've kind of half depressed, it will lock onto that bit and it will stay there regardless of whatever else happens. Okay. Whereas your AI servo, what it does is it tracks it. So once you lock onto something, if it moves or you move, it should in theory stay connected to the subject that you've already locked onto. Right. And then the AI focus is a kind of somewhere in between. It's sort of working out, if it stays still, it'll stay locked onto it. If it moves with it. So a lot of there's all these kind of different things. The problem with all of them is that so long as you are letting the camera make the choice for you, it will sometimes make choices you don't want it to have. Having said that, sometimes you just, maybe you don't have the skill. If something's moving, it's very, very difficult to keep manually focusing and pan and move the camera and stay locked on the subject. So actually, chances are the camera's going to do a better job of it than you are. Remember, ultimately, this is a tool. Okay, people get really hung up on the equipment. I lose count of the number of people who are obsessed with what my camera gear is, in a sense that if I had your camera, I could take photos like you. But it's a bit like saying, if I had a pencil, I could draw like you. If I had a typewriter like yours, I could write novels like you do. If I had an oven like yours, I could cook like you do. None of these things are true. This is a tool. And what you do is you learn how to use your tool to work best for you. Okay, so focusing then is one of these things whereby whether you're using the autofocus or manual focus, whether you're using single shot focus, whether you're using continual focus or tracking focus, and in the menu bar there's a whole bunch of different things that I can select. I can select options which make it better for sports photography or wildlife photography or street photography or studio photography, if I want to go through and use the camera to help me with those. So there's a whole bunch of tools on this which enable me to have more options. So I hope that makes sense. Now, with all that said, let's go back to the notion of back button focusing. So what we talked about first of all was that in most cases what happens is as you press the shutter, as you press this button here, the shutter goes down. As it reaches halfway, it starts to focus, and when you follow through, that's when it goes click. It clicks on the point that you focus, but the point that it focuses as you're halfway down. If you click very quickly, it might not have had time to focus, or if you just click slowly, it will focus and then you follow through and that's it. Okay, now back to this problem of the fact that sometimes things are moving backwards and forwards. Now, what do you do then? The notion of back button focusing is what you do is you separate out the focusing part from the click, from the shutter part. And to do that, one of the things you might notice on the back here, I've got a whole bunch of different buttons and bits and pieces. So, and up along the top here, I've got a few different extra buttons. And one of the things I can do is, if I want, I can go into the menu settings and change this. If I, where are we now? Can I get there? It looks like I've just run out of battery. So I can't show you. Okay, but it doesn't really matter. Up here, I can click on the menu, and up come a bunch of menu settings. And in amongst the menu settings on this camera, I can go through to the tools section, and actually I can customize the buttons. So each of these buttons has a default. Each of these buttons on the top has a default. But within a limitation, I can go through and I can select each of these buttons and I can assign it a particular role. Now, these little three buttons I've got on the back here, this one over on the right, in the top right corner, that allows me to decide whether I want to have to focus in this very specific small area or a wider area or the whole lot. But that gives me two other buttons here, which I can use for focusing. And one of them I've set to back button focus. So that when I want to focus, I actually use my thumb. I use my thumb and I press on this button here, and then when I'm happy with the focus, I can either take my thumb off or I can keep my thumb on it, and I can then go click. And by separating out the focusing from the clicking, it sometimes gives me more accuracy. Now, with this particular camera, I have another option. There's an option within the focus for eye or face recognition, which is incredibly useful in my line of work because I photograph people particularly. But I don't always need it. But what I've done is I've set the second button over here to operate on eye recognition. So if a face is close enough, it will lock on specifically to an eye. If the face is a bit too far back to be able to pinpoint the eye, it will lock onto a face. Okay? And so sometimes if I want to lock onto a face or an eye, I will use this one to focus. If I just want to kind of lock onto something more generally, say because I'm doing a bit of plant photography or architectural photography and I'm choosing my spot rather than worrying about a person, then I will use the other button. So the advantage then of having two different kinds of back button focusing is immense. If it was all just going through the first one, sometimes the face recognition or the eye recognition plays havoc if you're photographing something that doesn't have a face. When I'm trying to photograph a flower, if I press the wrong focus button, suddenly it's leaping all over the place and locking onto things I don't want it to. So ultimately then, back button focusing is something that gives you the option to separate out the focusing from the actual taking of the photo, from going click. It can help with the idea that there's maybe slightly less problem with hand movement, wobble, where you yourself move forward or back, or by pressing it yourself, the whole camera wobbles, because pressing with your thumb isn't wobbling it as much as pressing with your finger. But also, it gives me personally the option of having two different kinds of focus, which I can choose about. Now, how that works on your camera, well, every camera's got its own system. Even within Canon, every camera's got its own system. So basically, what you have to do is go and look it up. Either find the manual or find a good YouTube video, type in your camera, talk about back button focusing, or talk about custom focus, customizing the buttons, and you will find plenty of good videos out there that will show you how to do it. So I hope that makes sense. Apologies to anybody who has a more basic camera, doesn't go in this direction, or doesn't, but hopefully though, to Marilyn and anybody else who was interested in that makes sense. A couple more comments here. Stacey's joined us and says, it is day 4 of Hanukkah. Not freezing today, but supposed to rain. Rosemary says, actually, she uses back button focus only. Robert says, well said, a brush is not the artist. And that's going back to that notion of the tool. And I think it's a really important thing to understand that the camera is a tool. Now, sometimes, it's a bit like if you have an instrument, if a good instrument, say you play an instrument, you play a guitar. A well-made guitar is going to be slightly easier to play and you're going to get a sweeter sound out of it than a badly made guitar. But having said that, if you don't know how to play the guitar, a good guitar isn't going to suddenly turn you into an excellent guitarist. So, same thing with a camera. John's joined us. John Harvey says, good day. And he says, I've used back button focus for many years and much prefer it. And Susan says, I'm definitely going to have a go at this. I've never used it before. And I have to say, for me, I hadn't used it until last year, was it? Year and a half ago, whatever. I upgraded to the Canon R5, to the mirrorless. I'd always been using front, and people had talked about it, and I thought about getting round to it. But it was only when I actually upgraded my camera, and I had to kind of customize it and set it all up anyway, that I thought, well, okay, while I'm at it, let's try it now. So what else? And April says, hit the like button all. Is that asking people to hit the like on this video? Yes, please do. Might be something else. Right, okay, so thank you very much for that from Marilyn, and I hope that was useful or interesting to some of you. Quick little reminder that if you find these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining, and you would like to support them in some way, then buymeacoffee.com facebook.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways you can do it. And of course, another way you can do it is invite your friends along. Let's grow this wonderful community of ours. Right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk about Andy. But just before I get to that, at the end of the this session, I'm going to tell you about what's happening in the podcast over the next few weeks, because there's not going to be one, and then there'll be, of course, we're coming through the festive holidays, so that kind of messes things up a little bit. So stick around, and I'll tell you what's going on there. So meanwhile, let's move on. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to move on to Andy. So Andy sent me an image, and let me just dig this up, and double click that. Move that over there and switch this. So this is Andy's image. A lovely concept. I think there's definitely a lot in this one. Andy went on to say, this image was taken back when we were just coming out of lockdown in 2021. The pandemic had forced us all to appreciate the value of space in nature, and for a young generation raised devices in the privacy of their own rooms, they seem to be discovering outdoor space for the first time. The idea behind this image was to explore how a new generation of youth was relating to nature and their expectations of a sanitized online world. With their expectations of a sanitized online world. The working title for this was Living Room. I staged this image in a local wood with a model and lights. I had this for a while, but can't make it work despite various edits, and now it's just sitting on my editorial shelf. I'm hoping a fresh pair of eyes can invigorate it. Okay, so we have this photo, and great concept. I love what a fantastic TV, and brilliant colours, nicely echoing that 70s leather jacket that ties in beautifully with that. Lovely concept. Got the furniture, got the jacket, got the TV, sitting in an outdoor bluebell wood. And so the concept is there. But yes, I get what you mean, that somehow the look of it doesn't quite sit in the way that you feel it could. The concept is there, the idea, the props, the outfit, the model. Just why isn't it working? So let's just open this with Photoshop and have a little bit of a talk about it. So basically, my first thought with this, or my major thought with this, I love the idea and the concept, but really, ultimately, I think the problem is the lighting is wrong. And what you've got here is you've got the natural light. We can see that it's a sunny day. We can see the blue sky in the background. We can see the sun coming through and creating little sunny patches, nice little bits of dappled leaves and stuff on the trees and the bluebells over there. This part here, though, has been lit by a flash, or a flash in a softbox. You've got some kind of lighting source here to light up the young woman. And the rest of the background feels quite dark. And ultimately, I think the real thing here is the lighting balance. And what would have worked really perfectly with this would have been backlight. Would have been to actually, now, I think the best form of backlight would have in fact been the sunshine with this. Now, you've got various little pools, pockets, like here we can see where the sun is coming through, or over here where we can see where the sun is coming through. And I think if you had managed to place your model and the TV into one of these pockets of sun, with the sun coming through from behind, that would have created an edge light around her. And then your lighting system, your flash and your softbox, you would use as a fill light to just fill in enough of a shadow to light her up. But I think that would have allowed her to really feel like she was in the landscape. When you've got natural sunlight coming from behind, it's really going to place her in the situation. Plus, I'm always talking about the fact that backlight is the photographer's secret weapon. When you create a backlight, when you have that little bit of halo of light, that line that runs along the back, it makes a huge difference. Now, I can't emulate backlight completely on this, but what I do want to do is I want to show you a little bit, start to hint at towards what might change. So if for example, what I do is I'll immediately duplicate the layer so that we know what we're up against. Then I'm just going to, if I take a curves level, and I'm going to brighten things up like that. Now, too bright, so we don't want that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use, it's going to fill that layer. So it's gone to black, so nothing else is there. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lighten up the background. So if we, turn that to white, where are we? Yeah, and yeah, 100% there. And imagine then that we'd actually got more light in the background, okay? Something like that. So you'd exposed more, you'd got a better kind of lit background, something like that. And immediately we can see it's placing her in the landscape a bit more. She's not standing out as much as she did, okay? But what I might also do is add a little bit more light to the edge. I'll just do this. Now, it won't completely emulate it, but just to give you a slight sense here, what I will do is I'll just add on a little bit of edge light onto these kind of corners where the light might have been hitting her had there been a little bit of a pool of light down here. And then maybe there would have been a little bit just catching the edge of this TV, maybe a little bit on the edge of the table, something like that. Catch a little bit across here, maybe a little bit on here. Now, not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it starts to just give you a little bit of an idea then of what it might have looked like had she been lit from behind. Now, the other thing is the foreground's a little bit too light. So we'll take a curves level and we'll just drop the foreground down a bit. And once again, I will mask that out and then paint it back in. So we'll turn that to white and just darken down this foreground a little bit. And then maybe just 45, just half strength, maybe darken her a little bit, something like that. Maybe what happens if we take that down a little bit darker, something, maybe something like that. Now, I'll just group those together like that. And then what you can see then is we've gone from this to this. Okay, now, these little edge bits, they're not perfect by any stretch. But it's just that notion of trying to sort of give you a sense of, and I think there would have been much better if you little bit more shadow on her face, the way the light had gone, so that the light you're using from this side, as we're looking at this essentially over the left-hand shoulder, would have been more of a fill light, would have just sort of brought enough of her so that she didn't get lost in the shadow. And you then used a really nice backlight to get a strong sense of the background. Again, if I take that, I mean, we could even brighten that up a little bit more, kind of get a bit more of a sense of what it could be like with a nice little kind of patch of light, just kind of catching the edge of her. Actually, I think that hair and jacket looks pretty awful. It wouldn't really look anything like that. But ultimately, I'm just there to try and give you a sense of the idea that if you had light coming through and just catching the edge, I think that's what would really make all the difference. So hopefully then, Andy, that gives you a little bit of an idea that really, I think the ultimate problem with this isn't that, I think it's not a bad concept. I think it's a brilliant concept, and I love the props. I absolutely love the props. I love her jacket. I love that TV and the bench and the chair. She's great. She's just got that kind of passive attitude, you know, looking into the camera, not going to be overly bothered or freaked out or whatever. Nice kind of teenage look. But all the light is at the front, and it's making the back kind of feel, so it kind of makes her feel like stuck into the, it doesn't feel like it's as natural. Whereas if you've got the backlight, if you've got it so that you know, and you had her in a pool of sunlight as it came through. So it really did catch the red of her hair and the edge of her jacket and just the edge of the TV and light up a little pool of the bluebells around her. I think then you would have had something that would have really been exceptional. And ultimately, when you come and you look at this photo, and you're kind of looking at it going, what can I do to edit it? The problem is as a quick edit like this isn't going to do it justice, because the lighting in the original wasn't there, and it's just about impossible to add that lighting in unless you are super duper expert in Photoshop. And I have seen people who've added amazing levels of light to what isn't there. But that depends on your particular editing skills. But I hope that makes sense to you, Andy. Like I say, it's a lovely photo, but ultimately I think what you really needed was the backlight at the point you did it. And I think trying to edit it on from that to create that, you're either going to have to go off and find some seriously detailed tutorials on how to do that, or maybe you, if possible at all, you try and set it up again. Of course, probably looking at next spring now if you want the bluebell wood, but have that idea of using natural light, using natural sunlight as a backlight, and especially in the woods, I think it would have worked really well. Right, okay, couple of more comments. What have we got here? April says, I think because of the studio light in front, love the concept though. Andy says, yes, underexposed for ambient light. I was using a single strobe. Yeah, that's fair enough. I kind of, yes. Meg says, I really like the orange against the green background, works really well. And he says, oh, I likes what you do, likes what I'm doing, and we'll get working on it. April says, it is a cool photo, Andy, and I like the way you're thinking. Rosemary says, her hair is so pretty, backlight really would bring it out. And Andy says, yes, very much a light learning curve. Yes, and I think it is. It's one of those things that, I mean, one of the things I'm aware of with some of the other photography that you do, you've got studio lighting, you're kind of standard. Once you're inside a contained building and you're controlling all the light, you've got, you know, you've got really well, you've kind of nailed that. Natural light, you're really good at nailing that as well. A lot of the photos I've seen of you, especially your TEDS project out on the street, fantastic use of natural lighting. I think if you can start learning to combine your studio lights, strobes and reflectors and softboxes and what have you with the natural environment, suddenly there's a whole new world that opens up to you. In fact, actually, I'm just wondering, can I find... Ooh, I'm suddenly thinking of a photo I have, and the problem is the nightmare is trying to find and remember where I actually put it. Oh no, I do have it. Okay, let me show you just briefly where I've used a similar kind of effect. So some of you may remember this one where we did Polly Puller as Roald Dahl's fantastic Mr. Fox. And so she's got face makeup on, she's got outfit, she's got a chicken under her arm. Rather wonderfully, she had these rare breed sheep that just wandered into view. Were there only for a couple of minutes. I managed to include them in the photo. But the main thing here is the fact that what we've got is we've got a fairly low sun in the sky. It was early evening. It was April, I think, late April. Leaves are just starting to come out on the trees in the background, but not on this particular tree. We can see the catkins are ready to start coming out, but it hadn't happened on this tree yet. But the main bit, the whole point of this, is that the sun was used as a backlight, and we have this fantastic halo of golden light around her, on the edge of the sheep, and catching the edge of the bottle. And what I did over on the right hand side, equivalent of over the right hand shoulder as we're looking at this, I then have an off camera flash pointing at her, and you can tell then by the direction of the shadows on the bag here, if you kind of go backwards, then you end up with that sense of that's. So I'm using the strobe light as a fill so that she's not completely lost in the shadows. Another one that I did very similarly, let's see if I can find this one here. Now this one I wasn't using a strobe, I think I used a reflector. So the light's coming in from the left. We've got a lovely edge light on amber here in the bluebell wood, and I've got a friend of mine holding a nice reflector here with a gold surface on it, which is then bouncing some of the sunlight back onto Amber, so that she's got this lovely kind of golden glow on her. We can see the light just catching her and the horse. And in fact, actually, I think I had another version of this from a slightly different angle. This is where I've gone a bit haywire with the editing. Maybe go with that version. And got, again, sun cutting through, lovely backlight here, but we've also got using a reflector to bounce the sun back onto the subject. So that notion then of using the sun as a backlight, and it allows the subject to really feel like they are part of the environment, while that little kind of edged halo also separates them out from the background a little bit more as well. So I hope that all makes sense. Thank you for sending that one in, Andy. I thought it was a really interesting photo. I love the concept of it. Okay, a couple of, what have we got here? Andy says, cheers, Kim. April says, the sheep are like, what are you humans doing? Absolutely. And she loves the shot with the white horse. Right, okay. So that's pretty much it in terms of content for today. Now, everything's got a little bit slightly complicated for the next few weeks. We're coming up, we're kind of already into the festive season. As I said, Hanukkah, we're on day 4. Christmas is 3 weeks away. So, what are we doing about the podcast? Now, there won't be a podcast next week. Some of you may have known, who've been following me on Facebook, had a bereavement. My brother died a couple of weeks ago. And I would also like to say thank you to everybody who sent me messages of condolences and thoughts. They've been very much appreciated. The funeral is next weekend. It's down in Devon, which is about a 400-mile trip down. So next weekend, I'm going to be heading down there for that. So I won't be around to do a podcast then. The week after that is, of course, Christmas Eve. And I toyed with the idea, but actually, to be honest, Christmas Eve, you've probably got other things to do, better things to do, more busy things to do, more immediate things to do than the podcast, and probably I do too. So I'm not going to do one on Christmas Eve. So that means there won't be one on the 17th and there won't be one on the 24th. The next Sunday after that is the 31st, which is Hogmanay, New Year's Eve. I think I can squeeze one in then. And so what I thought I would do for that, though, is on the 31st, let's have, I think traditionally for the last 2 or 3 years, we're kind of like a festive challenge. It's not really a challenge, but let's just have festive photos, okay? We're in the festive season. Weather's dark and miserable. Certainly various bits of sadness and what have you flying around. And whether it's a more immediate loss like mine, or a lot of people have problems around Christmas when they remember loved ones and what have you, a little bit of festive cheer wouldn't go amiss. So let's see your photos, whether it's photos of decorations on the tree, whether it's photos of decorations around somebody else's house, whether you want to do something which is seasonal, whether it, kind of nice snow scene or winter scene, that if you're in the northern hemisphere, or more of a kind of or summer scene if you're in the southern hemisphere, or at the same time, I mean, for Fiji and India, I know there's been all these other kind of festivals as well. Kartigai something, sorry, forgotten that one. But I know that there's various ones, festivals of light and things like that. So if you want to do anything for that. So I think, so for the 31st, it'll give us a chance to create some festive photos and send them to me, okay? Tell me a little bit about the photo, tell me inspiration about it, what it was about, why you decided to do it. And then on the 31st, what we'll do is we'll go through the photos, we'll see what everybody else's interpretation of what a festive photo can be like, and we'll just kind of enjoy that part of it, being right in the heart of it. And then the following week will be the 7th of January, and one of the things we've again traditionally done now for the last 2 or 3 years at the beginning of January is to say, send me your best photo of 2023. Okay, so your best photo of the last year, or your favourite photo, okay? And again, tell me what is it about it that makes it the best, or your favourite photo of the year. And we will just enjoy and be inspired by how everybody else in our group, everybody who sent something in, has interpreted, and the different ways we use this tool. You know, I mean, a tool, but so many different ways of using it, so many different ways of interpreting. It's part of what I absolutely adore about photography, and it's part of what I absolutely adore about these podcasts, is each of you has your own unique way of seeing, your own unique way of interpreting what's around you. And sometimes, fine, I'm here, I give you a hand wherever I can. If you have problems, you have sticking points, something's getting in the way of you being able to realize your vision, then please send me your images and I will do my best to help. But for all that, what I do try and do ideally is help you achieve your vision, not just tell you what my vision should be. And so 31st, make sure before then that you send me your favourite or your best festive photo, and for the 7th of January, send me your favourite or best photo of 2023. Right, okay. That brings us to a conclusion. Thank you ever so much to Marilyn for your question about back button focusing. I hope everybody found the answer reasonably useful for that. And to Andy for a wonderful photo there. And I hope that, again, that notion of understanding how to get the light may well have helped you with that. Yeah, that's it. Have a really good festive season to enjoy Christmas if you celebrate Christmas, enjoy Hanukkah if you celebrate Hanukkah, enjoy whatever other festivals you happen to be. Of course, there's the solstice as well. If you happen to celebrate solstice, then I hope it's a good one for you. And I'll catch up with you in 3 weeks at New Year's Eve, and then we'll look through your festive photos. Take care, everyone. Have a good Christmas. Bye-bye.